All right, here's our reading. D-Day, 1944. Okay, we'll go. With these words, General Eisenhower, Commander-in-Chief of the Allied Forces, announced the beginning of the long-awaited invasion of Europe. Since the disaster at Dieppe, the Allies have been carefully planning. This time they would be ready. The Normandy beaches of northern France were selected as the site of the invasion. Normandy was close to Britain, and the invading army, supply ships, and reinforcements would not have to go too far. A huge army gathered in the south of England. American troops numbering 1.25 million joined a similar number of British and Commonwealth troops, including 30,000 Canadians. 4,000 landing craft, 700 warships, and 11,000 planes were ready. The Germans had 60 divisions in northern France and the Netherlands under the commander of Field Marshal Rommel. In 1944, Allied bombers started attacking and destroying German military sites in northern France. The idea was to soften the enemy defenses. I'm just going to scroll a little bit here. D-Day was fixed for June the 5th, 1944, but the invasion had to be postponed because of bad weather. At 2 a.m. on June 6, paratroopers were dropped to protect the landing forces. 75 minutes later, 2,000 bombers began to pound the German defenses on the beaches. At 5:30 in the morning, the air raids were joined by the guns of Allied warships. Then at precisely 6:30 a.m., the first wave of Canadian, British, and American troops poured onto the beaches of France. A couple hours later, some of those Canadians were from Perth County. This was Canada's largest military operation. Parachutists were dropped behind enemy lines. 14,000 soldiers set to hit the beaches of France. The Royal Canadian Navy had 100 ships and 10,000 sailors. Flying overhead were 36 Canadian bomber squadrons. The Canadian soldiers landed at Juno Beach. They faced underwater obstacles, landmines, barbed wire, heavy machine gun fire from the Germans. At the end of the day, they met their objectives, the only Allied force to do so. They had suffered 335 dead Canadians, 739 wounded. A Canadian forward observation officer described his role in the battle. He was assigned to fly a glider with troops, a jeep, and radio equipment behind enemy lines. This is what he wrote. We were towed across the English Channel by aircraft and squadrons of gliders, and then we were released just as we hit the coast. The first thing we had to do was to haul the tail off the glider so we could get the jeep out. You didn't stay where you landed. You got out of there as fast as you could. It was dark, but we could hear gunfire and cars revving up and tanks moving. We drove maybe a couple kilometers to a small village called Ranville and hauled our radio equipment up a church steeple, which was our first observation post. When daylight came, there was firepower everywhere. It was one big gathering of men and materials and planes and guns. We got the wireless out, that was their radio, and started to send messages about the ranges and locations of German troops to the warships out in the channel. We called for a few shots and they were socking them down. We were right in the middle of the battle. Within a week, the Allies had 300,000 troops safely on shore. Within a month, 1 million of our soldiers had landed with 200,000 vehicles. Though the German forces did fight hard, Hitler was now caught with a war on two fronts, the Soviets on the east and the Allies on the west. And after this successful invasion, it was just a matter of time before the Germans were defeated.